Good afternoon, everybody. At the outset, I would like to thank APEC for giving me the opportunity to share the results of a small survey that I did looking at variations in practice of regional analgesia in women who were taking 150 milligram of aspirin following the publication of ASPRI trial and the new NICE hypertension in pregnancy guidelines. And I would also like to extend my thanks to Professor Chappell and Professor Shannon for supporting the survey. So we all are familiar with ASPRI trial. It came out in 2017, and it showed that using a dedicated first trimester screening algorithm, women who are high risk for preeclampsia, by giving them 150 milligrams of aspirin from 12 to 36 weeks, we can achieve about a 2/3 reduction in the incidence of preterm preeclampsia. This was a landmark RCT, and the evidence from this RCT was incorporated into subsequent national guidelines such as Saving Babies' Lives version 2, which recommended 150 milligrams of aspirin for preventing fetal growth restriction. And the same guideline has also now been adopted by FIGO and ISSHP. NICE guideline, as we know, came out in June 2019. And from the earlier version of guideline in 2010, where the recommendation was 75 milligrams, the new guideline recommended a dose of 75 to 150 milligrams to be taken from 12 weeks until the birth of the baby. The remit or the scope of the guideline was not to look at the evidence behind the dosage of aspirin, but following comments provided by NHS England, BMFMS, and RCOG, in order to align the recommendations and avoid conflict between the recommended dosage, the guideline development group from NICE decided to adopt and have a consistent approach in terms of prescription of aspirin. So since then, we know that most units in UK have either adopted or adopting dosage of 150 milligrams. In our unit, we discussed the change of dosage with our anesthetist, and following a wider consultation, they agreed to provide regional anesthesia with this dose. But then there was a sporadic case in 2019 where a lady with previous preterm preeclampsia and stillbirth who was given 150 milligram aspirin in next pregnancy, she then developed gestational diabetes and superimposed preeclampsia at 34 weeks, requiring early delivery by cesarean section. But on the day when she arrived for her cesarean, the anesthetist felt that the dosage of 150 milligram was not safe for regional analgesia, and therefore she ended up having a general anesthesia. So while the cesarean was straightforward, but parents missed the moment of birth, which I think is very important for every family. So clearly this was a case of conflicting intrapartum management and led to a negative patient experience. So this particular issue resonated with me for a while, and I wanted to find out what is the practice out there. Are there other units where obstetricians and anesthetists are following a similar practice? So I did a Twitter survey, and we know that there are limitations when we do a survey on social media, but accepting all the limitations, I put a question out to say that in your unit, are the anesthetists happy to give regional analgesia if the lady has been taking 150 milligrams of aspirin? And the results of the survey were as you see. So about 20% units said this was not applicable because at that time they were only giving 75 milligrams. About 60% of responders said yes. 6% responders said no, and about 15% responders said that this depends on the anesthetist on the day. So if we say that about half of the anesthetists would say no, then we are left with potential 10 to 12% of women who might end up with a general anesthesia on the day, or maybe declined a regional analgesia. So it is important for us to also know what is the guideline from the anesthetic bodies. So looking at the literature, I came across the national audit projects that is run jointly by the anesthetic associations. And in 2013, they did an audit, and it's a series of audits. And the NAP3 series of audit was to look at the major complications of central neuraxial block in United Kingdom. And the result of this audit The results of this audit led to production of this guideline called as the RAPAC guidance. And what the RAPAC guidance showed us that the spinal epidural hematoma or the vertebral canal hematoma generally is a very rare event. In obstetric population, the incidence is less than 1 in 100,000. And the contributory factors for hematoma are technical difficulty and intraoperative blood loss of greater than 1500 mLs. But specifically with regards to aspirin, the document was very clear that no additional precautions for neuraxial blockade are required. More recently, there has been UCOS study on epidural hematoma and abscess, and it was presented as a poster in the International Obstetric Anesthesia Society meeting last year. And the results show that there were 17 cases in all in 2.5 million maternities. 6 were hematomas, 11 were abscesses. 13 women had labor analgesia, 4 had cesarean. Out of those, 14 had epidural and 3 had combined spinal epidural. But the most important finding to note was that none of the women with hematoma had any abnormalities of clotting. Then I looked at the evidence from outside the UK just to have a feel of what the other guidelines say. And I came across this very nice summary published in British Journal of Anesthesia in 2015 by a group from Spain. And they summarized evidence from all over the world or the guidelines available at that time. And this was a very comprehensive review of clinical evidence. And their conclusions were that the high dose and low dose aspirin has not been clearly established in literature, creating confusion. Yes, there are few reports of spinal hematoma involving aspirin therapy, but in them, generally, there were additional complicating factors such as traumatic tap or multiple insertions or a dual anticoagulant, such as low molecular weight heparin. And they concluded that isolated aspirin up to doses of 300 milligram, it does not increase the risk of spinal hemorrhagic complication, and it is not a contraindication to neuraxial blocks. And therefore, they called for the necessity to establish uniform criteria. So in conclusions, I would say that while we have plenty of reassuring data from UK, from the NAP audit, as well as the UCOS study, there is significant variation in practice across the units in UK and internationally. And the reasons for these are multifactorial. Discussing with our own anesthetic colleagues, they have said that there is a varied level of acceptance and risks among the anesthetic colleagues based upon their training, awareness, knowledge, and education. For a standalone unit like Liverpool Women's and other standalone hospitals, there are local challenges such as lack of availability of timely blood tests, lack of access to diagnostic radiological service on site, and neurosurgical input should there be a problem. So it is very important that we review the relevant specialty guidelines to explain the inconsistencies in practice and call for a need for standardization. And also the guidelines should include relevant stakeholders in the guideline development panel. And a question that I have is that should we continue aspirin until birth as recommended by NICE guideline, or should we stop it at 36 weeks as per ASPRI? Because if we are telling women to continue taking aspirin till birth, but on the day we subject them to a general anesthesia, then we are failing in our duty of care to these women. And it is also very important that when key indicators to drive quality improvement in obstetric anesthesia are looked at, and this statement has only been published last month, it is very important to also include the variations in care across the units due to a difference between how we think as obstetricians and what is the perception of anesthetists. So there needs to be a common meeting ground so that the care can be optimized. Thank you for your attention.